Hello, and welcome to Aqua Aqua Cocktail. Do you know who is Joe Doe? Don't know Joe Doe? Well, he is actually one of the creators of the world's top cocktail. Don't you know the world's best-selling cocktail? Stay with me, I'll explain. Let's look at history. Back to 1898. The Spanish-Cuban War. The Spanish lose Cuba, the Americans stay as occupying forces. They will begin to withdraw from 1900 until 1901 to 1902, though some will stay. U.S. forces on the island. So, legend has it that a soldier named Joe Edoy at an American bar where officers and soldiers would meet around the year 1900 to 1902, which is not clear, asked the bartender to mix rum with some lime and a Coca-Cola. You know the cocktail, the Cuba Libre, but you will say, Felix, the Cuba Libre is not a cocktail, it is a mix. No. The International Bartenders Association recognizes even the latest book I own, which dates back to 1924, that the Cuba Libre is a four-part drink. It is a four-part drink. It is a long drink, a three-part, but it is a four-part. Right. I will continue the history, then we will make a Cuba Libre in a way rarely seen in many places. Because what they usually add to what they give you to drink is a rum and coke, a rum and coke, or a rum and cola. It might be that famous song by the Andrews Sisters, Rum and Coca-Cola, back in the 1940s, during the Second World War. Very good. Let us see. When and where was this cocktail born? There are several versions. As I have already said, it is attributed to Joe Doe, a soldier who was at the Neptune bar. Rare for a soldier at Bar Mistuno, usually it was two officers. But let us assume he is an auxiliary or maybe a lieutenant. Well, officers do not usually mix with the troops, especially when drinking, to avoid indiscretions. Well, he says that upon asking a bartender, whose name we do not know, he orders this, and the people nearby say he is drinking, and he says, well, I am making a toast with Coca-Cola and this, and long live Cuba Libre. And everyone says, oh, that sounds good, give us one, long live Cuba Libre. The cry of long live Cuba Libre was used by the Mambi Army. The Mambi Army was the liberating army of the Cubans, who fought the Spanish until the Americans intervened and tipped the war in their favor, right? There was Jose Marti, Maceo, in short, many people from the Cuban patriots who achieved independence after several wars, because it was not just one war. The Cuban War lasted over 10 years, what is called the Great War, the Little War, and so on. So I say at Bar Nestuno, this event occurs. Another version is that an unknown bartender mixed it up. This comes to support the standard version, right? He mixed rum and Coca-Cola and said, well, it is like the Union, the fusion of the two countries that gave us independence and such. This is another Cuban story, which could be true. What we do have is clear personal evidence that occurs in the year 1965. There is a man named Fausto Rodriguez who says he witnessed the birth of the cocktail. He mentions a captain, Russell. We do not know his first name, only his last name. He was a captain in the American Army Signal Corps and Communications Division. I imagine that when the American troops left the island, for the most part, some small detachment would have remained, likely a communications staff force, to keep the American command informed. This Captain Russell says he tells the bartender, why don't you go to Daiquiris? And he says, hey, well, the daiquiri is very acidic. Why don't you pour in a Coca-Cola? Because Coca-Cola had just arrived in Cuba. I will explain that now. And damn, I want a Coke because we Americans drink Coke. And by mixing it, the Cuba Libre was born. So, in other words, the Cuba Libre would derive from the daiquiri, short, without sugar logically, but with cola, with Coca-Cola. It also says there was a newspaper in the year 28 by Mela, called Cuba Libre. Viva Cuba Libre. We mean the year 21. What we know for sure, referenced in Johnny Viscalante's book from the year 15, is that Cuba Libre was already being served. Some say the Florita was invented there. In Cuba, everything was the Florita. Everything was the Florita, but that's false. Well, this is the brief history of the Cuba Libre, but truly, when was the Cuba Libre born? It had to be born in Havana between 1900 and 1902. Why is that? Because Coca-Cola began to be imported into Cuba in the year 1900. It wasn't in bottles yet, just soda fountains. By 1902, there were bottles. They say an Englishman brought it too. It could be, but come on, never before 1900, and 1902 would be the cutoff date. And well, this is a bit of the short history of the Cuba Libre. Let's make a Cuba Libre. You'll say, how simple. It is true, it's a simple drink. We can work in two ways. Normally we have our highball glasses, the long drinks, the tall Collins, the classic, the tumbler 10.5 ounces, and the Rockefellers too, 12.5 ounces, 12 to 13 ounces. I'm going to prepare it in the Rockefeller glass, because it is the typical club glass. We'll remove it, though it's still there, eh? Good. Let's see. It is very easy. It was prepared right in the bathroom. You already know. We are going to add ice. We are going to add ice, a good amount of ice. The Cuba Libre is actually a soft drink, because even though you might drink it at nightclubs and such, the Cuba Libre is truly a soft drink. Lime, important. If it does not have lime, it is not a Cuba Libre. Let us cut a lime in half. Okay? And we are going to squeeze approximately, the IBA recipe says 10 milliliters. 10 milliliters would be 2 bar spoons, or a tablespoon. Half of a small lime is 10 milliliters. We will squeeze the lime inside the glass with ice. Okay? Others also say, for a Cuba Libre, you can put in lime wedges just like you do with a caipirinha, muddle them, and then add the rest. It is another version, a more Creole and homemade style. In elegant bars, it was served this way. We have our 10 milliliters of lime, which is about 1/3 of an ounce or 1/4 of an ounce. They say the first Cuba Libre was made with Bacardi rum. Yes, that could be true. I recommend, if you make it, I do not have it here, or I would, using Bacardi Carta Oro. The Carta Oro, okay? The gold rum from Bacardi. You can use the 5-year-old too, of course, but, well, supposedly it was made with white rum, right, originally? Or the Carta Oro later, because they want to sell it, and Bacardi pushed Carta Oro as Bacardi. I have ads from 1912 showing the best Cuba Libre is made with white or Carta Oro. Use a 3-year white rum. I can use Bacardi or any white rum. Any white rum works here. I can also use dark rum. The rum choice is up to you. I am currently making the original recipe. If you want to add Brugal, Flor de Caña, or Zapata, you can add whatever you want, correct? But the true Cuba Libre is always made with white rum. 2 ounces rum. That is fine. We have the rum, we have the lime, we can stir. It is not necessary. And now we are going to serve the Coca-Cola. How much Coca-Cola do you need to serve? If you serve it as a cubata, you would serve the Coca-Cola and leave the bottle on the side. But if it is a cocktail, we will bring it served to the table or bar. It comes fully prepared. So we are going to use about approximately 4 ounces of Coke. It is approximately a little over half a cup of cola. Stir gently so it keeps its fizz. And garnish. The lime with 1, you are able to a little lime wheel, or also I do this a lot, as it flavors the cocktail well. Take a peeler and get a lime peel. And rub the glass and put it in. Serve it with straws. Some drink it with straws. And this is the Cuba Libre, the famous original and authentic Cuba Libre. You can also place the lime slice on the rim of the glass if you like. I recommend putting it inside. And the peel, it is important that we stir the cocktail. Well, this is a little history of the Cuba Libre, a cocktail that, as you will see, many people take as a joke. Like it is not a cocktail, just a mix. They are called that. Well, no, it is a cocktail. The IBA recognizes it, even in its latest version from 2024. Thank you very much for everything. I hope you liked the video. This video is very simple, but I like telling a bit of the history of the Cuba Libre because there is a lot of confusion about this. When you try it, you will see it does not taste like the one at the club. It does not. Well, I hope you subscribe and thank you very much for everything. Soon I will upload a video answering a request for cocktails with whiskey. We have not made a whiskey cocktail yet. We are going to make one. Of someone famous but not well known, and I'm sure you will like it. Thank you very much. Please stand.